Hi everyone, welcome in. You found room 411, which was the unsigned, unnumbered room. You found it here, so plus 5 points for everyone. Well done. This, my friends, is Laura Joyce Davis. She has she's got a wonderful bio. You should definitely click the QR code. But for today's purposes, I'm just going to tell you that Laura loves wombats. She loves old world wines. Did you bring any? That's for after. That's the after party. And Enneagram 4s. She likes all Enneagrams, but especially the 4s if you guys want to meet up after. And if she could come back in another life, she would be a blues singer. Are you going to sing something for us now, or is that after as well? That's with the wine?
Maybe later. No, I'm just kidding. This is not going to be no singing today. Although, as you'll hear, I think we maybe should form a band.
Definitely.
Yeah, after.
Let's give it up for Laura Joyce Davis, everyone.
All right, Harriett Jernigan, wave your hand, Harriet, has been a professional baker, a competitive fencer, and a spontaneous backup singer. And she never won Ben Stein's money. Jia Rizvi's obsession with true crime causes insomnia, but she won't stop watching it. She can't sing or play an instrument, but she's always regretted not starting a band. She will drink Prosecco any time of day. And Annmarie Kelly is both a dancing queen and a brick house. She loves kickboxing, karaoke, hound dogs, ping pong, books that make her laugh, movies that make her cry, and salads other people make her eat. This is our panel for today. We're going to share with you all of the good stuff that we have learned, and hope you will be excited to learn too about being a podcast guest, and an interesting one, not just a podcast guest, but getting yourself on shows and having the experience of making those people just be so glad that they asked you to be on their show and asking you back for more. So I want to open actually with a question, because we come to these talks at AWP, and there's a lot of time where we're sitting and just sort of absorbing what the people up in the panels say. But we know that every single one of you has a super interesting life, and whether or not you're sharing that on a panel here somewhere else, we want you to turn to somebody next to you and answer this question. If you were a fly on the wall, what would you love to hear other people say about you? And before you turn to that person, I just want to give you a little preview of the sound you're going to hear that tells you should come back. Are you ready, Harriet? Okay, when you hear this, oi! That means you need to come back and be quiet, and whatever you're saying, just be like, okay, thanks, yeah, and then turn around. So let's try it one more time, Harriet. When you hear this sound, oi! It means your time's up. Okay, so if you were a fly on the wall, what would you love to hear people say about you? Don't overthink it, just whatever comes to mind, that's the answer. Turn to somebody next to you, you'll have just a couple minutes for this. Back up here. I'm going to actually ask Annmarie to take a place at the podium here, because it seems like this is our only working mic today. So, Annmarie, would you share with us, Annmarie, by the way, her podcast is called Wild Precious Life. Many fabulous, often famous authors have been guests on her show. Some of the people you are seeing here at AWP have been on her show. It's a beautiful, beautiful show. Check it out. So Annmarie is booking people all the time on her show, and specifically literary folks. Maybe some of you want to get on Annmarie's show. I suggest that you try. So Annmarie, tell us, what's the process of booking guests for your show? And just give us some insight into what makes a good pitch, what doesn't, and how people can help you as a producer to say yes to them.
Got it. So I want you all to pitch my show, right? I want you to write your grand, great, beautiful, burning work. And then I want you to look for my email and send me a pitch and say, can I be on your show? And I want to say yes. I really, really do. However, just between you and me, most of us are kind of terrible at saying what it is we do. You know how it's Thanksgiving and there's that aunt who's like, how's the writing going? How much money are you making? How is it going? And then you turn into like a puddle of all like your worst fears, and someone asks you what you're writing and it starts to sound like describing a dream. You're like, well, it's kind of like, it's like me but not me. It's like you were there, but it wasn't you. And it's like, it's sort of about, and we just lose our minds, right? We're not really great. We write beautiful, burning things, but we are shite at telling people about them, right? Those are the pitches I get. So I get two kinds of pitches. I get the ones where people tell me what they're writing, but I can't quite understand it. I know there's something there, but I don't know what it is. Or I get the really shiny, like you hired somebody, and it's fine with me if you're someone people hire, right? You're hired to pitch podcasts, and it's very shiny, but I don't know why you're a good fit for my show. So I get lots of investment pitches. I'm all for money. I don't make any, but someone should. And I get these pitches, and all I'm thinking to myself is, have you ever listened to my show? Because I have no money, and no skills, and no 401k, because I drained it to buy that house when I like to buy high and sell low, I guess is what I like to do. But so my point is, whatever it is you're pitching, just make sure it's a good fit for the show. So Wild Precious Life is a show where we talk about books and movies and poetry. And so if you've written poetry or a book or a movie, then please pitch me. And also, trick me into believing that you've ever listened to my show. It's fine if you lie to me. I'm fine with that. Go ahead and go back through the people I've interviewed, right? Say, oh, Sarah Manguso, Kwame Alexander, Celeste Ng. Find someone whose work, your work, is in communion with or conversation with. I just interviewed Kristen Arnett, who has a book about a lesbian birthday clown. Maybe you have also written a book about a lesbian birthday clown. Or maybe yours is about a different lesbian. Whatever it is, but you could just tell me, I also write about birthday clowns, but my clowns roller skate, or my clowns juggle, or my lesbian is actually really into bowling. Whatever it is, you just let me know how your work is in conversation with a guest who I've already interviewed. And that's just one way to help me say yes to you. I want to say yes to you. But I only have, a couple of shows a month, right? I'm an adjunct professor and a podcaster. I do other things, so I can't say yes to all of them. So it's just one way to do that right now. Laura asked me like 100 questions before. Does anyone remember the other ones? Oh, okay, so how do you get on a show? So also just start with what you listen to. Presumably you're here either because you were lost and just wanted a place to sit down, and that's fine. No judgment. That's fine. But presumably you're here because you listen to podcasts. You listen to at least one. Start there. Is that a show that you could be on? If not that show, maybe the network they're on. I'm on a network called Evergreen, but there's all kinds of networks. Maybe you go back and find who are the shows that you're in communion with in conversation there, and pitch that way. But so again, learning how to tell your story, which is what we're about to hear more about from these guys, and then making sure that your pitch is a good fit for the show. Last thing I'll say is like a compliment goes a long way. So someone pitched me today and they're like, oh my gosh, I really loved when you said, and they quoted me back to me, right? And again, lie to me, it's fine. Like go back 7 episodes and find something I said to somebody and then quote that back to me. And I'll fall for it almost every time because, who doesn't have a little bit of an ego? But just make it sound like you're familiar with the work. And as Laura said, if anybody up here impresses you or you want to know more, follow them on socials. Be a part of the literary community. I really do believe that the podcast world, even though there are scads of podcasts out there, it's one big small town that you'll start to know the same people and run into the same people. And we want you to be a citizen in that town. And so I look forward to your pitches. I want to hear your story. and I can't wait until you come on the show. I can't wait to meet you and have everyone here buy your books, because that's my whole secret agenda, right? I want people to know about your stuff and buy it. That's it. Okay, but how do we tell our stories? Because that's a big part of how we do that. So let's say you've landed it. You got me to say yes. You don't want to come on there and then not seal the deal, not let people know what you're about. So Laura and Harriett, Laura, I think you're going to go first, right? So Laura, let's say they get on the show. How do you get people to tell their story in a way that doesn't suck?
Great question, Annmarie. So one thing that I think may be obvious to some of you, but was definitely not obvious to me when I started being a guest on a show, is that the skill set for being a great guest is actually not the same skill set as being a great interviewer. And my podcast, Shelter in Place, that I started on day one of the pandemic and did for 200 episodes, I had 100 interviews that were part of those 200 episodes. And so I learned over the course of making this podcast how to be a much better interviewer than I was when I began. And then I started getting on shows, and I very quickly realized that what made me a great interviewer was not what made me a great guest. And in fact, I wasn't a very good guest in the beginning. There's one interview out there somewhere which I am so grateful never got put out in the world, because it was that bad. And we've never talked about it. It's like this dirty little secret, but this podcaster who asked me to be on her show, I'm like, thank goodness she did not publish that episode, because it was just terrible. And I feel super grateful for that opportunity, because it taught me in that moment, experience is such a good teacher, right? And our mistakes are the best teachers. It taught me that me just talking about, responding to the questions in a way that was authentic and felt true to me was actually not always that interesting. Like, that was not a given. So one thing I want to share with you, we're kind of breaking this down, each of us sharing a different part of this. One thing that I have learned, and I learned this as an interviewer, but I really learned it as an interviewee, is that if you go into a conversation already having some sort of understanding of some of the stories that you can tell, they don't have to be practiced or canned or whatever, although it's not a bad idea to have some sort of mini narrative arc. But if say, your origin story, we'll come back to those 6-word stories that I asked you about in the beginning. If you know the story of how you came to this thing that you're doing right now, whether it's the book you wrote or how you ended up teaching at the place you're teaching or whatever, that origin story is going to be something you're going to get asked about again and again and again. And learning to tell it quickly and concisely and interestingly is going to really help people to get to know you as a character, because you are a character in that conversation, right? So I learned very quickly that, there were many, many things I could say about Shelter in Place. The story that I now tell is something along the lines of, it was March 16th, 2020. I'd had my first long, horrible day home with my 3 children, who were very young at the time. And my husband walked through the door, and he took one look at me, and he was like, maybe you should go for a bike ride. And so I did, and it was magic hour, and I went up into the Oakland Hills, and I got this idea that felt like it was going to save my life. And the idea was to start this podcast called Shelter in Place. What a novel phrase. Never heard of that before. And really tell the story of what it was like to live in this moment right now, as a mom of 3 kids, a writer who had been very creatively frustrated by parenting for 8 years and needed a lifeline. And that was that podcast. And 200 episodes later, I'm here with you today and many other things. So telling that story, that probably took about 60 seconds to tell that story. That's what I did there, is something that I want to just impart to you as a great storytelling tool anytime you need to tell a story. And that is, put us in a scene. Help us to see what it looks like in that specific moment where everything changed for you. And it might be this small, quiet moment. As I was biking up into the Oakland Hills where I live, nobody could see what was going on for me, but things were exploding inside my brain. I was having this moment where it felt like the heavens were opening up and giving me a gift. And that gift, has led me to you today. Truly, it changed everything. So knowing those moments in your life when something changed, and then being able to articulate them using the 5 senses, being able to talk about what did it feel like in that moment to be you. And there's another little storytelling technique. So now my day job is that I teach narrative podcasting at the Stanford Storytelling Project. And so something we talk about constantly there is that narrative arcs are made up of scenes and reflections or meaning making of those scenes. And so if you think of your life, of these moments, as a series of scenes or moments, and then whatever meaning you make of that scene. I can tell you about that moment when I'm on the bike ride at Magic Hour and the sky's pink and I'm feeling stressed out and overwhelmed and depressed and all the things we were feeling at the beginning of the pandemic. And then I can tell you the meaning that I'm making of that moment is this wasn't really just about the pandemic. This was about a deep identity crisis I was having as somebody who had been told that being a parent would be fulfilling to me. And I loved my children, I do love my children, but I was super creatively frustrated and depressed and feeling like I was dying inside. And so being able to have some creative work, as crazy and problematic as everything was in the world, that felt like a gift. And that set me on a course that really helped me to just ask day after day after day, how do we live in the tension of all of the problems in our world and be honest about that, not to sugarcoat anything, and at the same time, how do we not lose hope? That question right there, that was the heart of every single episode, all 200 episodes of Shelter in Place. And it's my central obsession in life, right? Everything I do comes back to that. If you know how to answer that question of, what are the things that you just can't stop thinking about? What are the questions that make you wake up at night because you're so excited and electrified about thinking about them? That's the kind of stuff that when you're in an interview setting, it's really good to just have that in your back pocket. Because probably they're going to ask you about your origin story. Probably they're going to ask you about some sort of change or transformation, because that's what stories are, right? Something happens and someone changes or transforms. And if you can do it in scenes, you are often offering up to them this beautiful interview tape, which if they are a good producer and interviewer, they will be like, yes, this is the gold stuff that I'm always hoping for. And when somebody naturally speaks in scenes and tells you a story, a short story, not too long, but a short story, that's a gift. So on that note, we're going to keep going here to Harriett, who, just to give a little bit of preview, we're going to take a small, not intermission, but we're going to come back to the 6-word story idea. But I want to say first just a preview of Harriett and what she does. So Harriett and I teach together at Stanford. She teaches in the program of writing and rhetoric with me. And thanks to Harriett, I have become a live storyteller. She founded and runs a beautiful organization called First Person Story that is bringing stories from the margins to the center. And it is just something you should check out. It's in the Bay Area, but there's a podcast coming very soon, and if you go to the website, you'll see all of the gorgeous, beautiful stuff Harriett's doing. But before we get to Harriett, there's 2 things I want to say. The first is think about your 6-word stories, because in a second, you're going to have a chance to share your story with somebody next to you. And the other thing is, if you are thinking about pitching shows like Annmarie's or something else, go to their website, listen to their podcast, try to get a sense of how their values as a podcast, as an organization, align with your story. And if they don't align at all, that's probably just not a place that's a great fit for you to pitch. But if they do align, that's something you really want to focus on, both in the way you pitch yourself and in the story that you tell on their podcast. Because if you understand what their listeners care about, you're going to be a much more delightful and wonderful guest that their listeners will be like, oh yes, this is my people right here. So, okay, 6-word stories. as a little bit of a prompt here, we are all going to share our 6-word origin stories with you. So I will start. Misunderstood middle child, feelings become superpower. All right, Harriet, you're next.
Fighting to stay out of jail.
Annmarie. Oh, come on here.
Yes.
Oh, that one's working. That's good.
I did not want to come.
And finally, Jia.
Well, mine was, I want to Prosecco right now.
Okay, so Harriet, first of all, let's just turn to somebody next to you and share your 6-word story if you came up with one. We'll take like 60 seconds to do this. We'll do this really fast. And what's the sound that brings us back, Harriet? Oi! Okay, so when you hear that, you gotta come back.
I want to be a rude boy, just like my dad.
Harriet's a Germanist. Maybe you speak German. Come talk to her and you'll make her very happy.
Yeah, I actually did not win Ben's Times money. That's the question that should come afterwards, is where do you want Ben's? How many of you are familiar with Win Ben Stein's money? Okay, I did terribly. Turns out being in front of a camera and shitloads of lights makes you blank out. And when there's a 22-year-old like college student who wants it more than you do, right? I don't
Variety of people, we gotta do these things.
I know, I hate my plosives though. Good time. So, one of the things about interviews is, for me, they function a lot like job interviews. And I don't know about you, but I love doing job interviews. Love doing job interviews. By the time I'm done in a job interview, we are all holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Like, every single time. I haven't not gotten a job after an interview in almost 2 decades. Love getting, I love. And I mean, here's the key, right? And I was just saying this morning, like, I used to have a retail job selling luggage, and I had like the best commission of everybody in my store because I love luggage. Love it. I would get inside the suitcase. I would sing its praises. I would always start with the Samsonite, and by the time they were done, they were walking out with the French or the Hartman or the Toomey. But like never tried. But like, I mean, here's the thing, right, is that this is your opportunity when you're doing an interview, a job interview, a talk, a presentation, to geek out about the shit you love. This is the opportunity to geek out about the shit you love with people who want to hear about the shit you love, right? Or else you wouldn't be there. I think one of the things that happens a lot, and this is what we go through in the first person workshop, is there is a fear of falling short of perfection. And there's no such thing as perfection, especially when you're talking impromptu live, right? It's not perfect, but it's good. And the most important thing that comes through in any interview is how much you care, right? How much you care is one of the most important things you can ever do. Authentic and flawed and clay feet and all of it, and ugly and dirty and funny, but how much you care, right? Like right before I came in, I was like, I have like food crumbs everywhere. Don't care. That's not my issue. My issue is to come in and geek out about the stuff that I love, which is storytelling, right? So I think one of the things, and I don't think Laura had a chance to get to this, but we'll cross over, is that when you are setting these scenes and telling these stories, there's like a couple of really great books out there about storytelling for the professional setting. One of them is Karen Eber's The Perfect Story, which despite some cultural stuff is actually quite a good book. Corey Rosen's Your Story Well Told, there's a couple of others. But one of the things that they all talk about is when you're setting the scene, activate the 5 senses. The hardest one to activate is smell, but if you can get smell into a story, you are golden, right? To describe something, a story about prostitution and pie pans in Germany and everything. My roommate had a cellar, and it was winter, and she had a bumper crop of apples, right? And they're in dry storage in the cellar. Now I could stop there, right? You have a picture, right? There's a dry storage cellar somewhere with apples. But then I say, there are these green apples sitting in the dry air of cold storage, giving off a perfume of summer, right? That is where a story comes alive. You're not gonna nail all 5 senses in any one particular scene, but what you wanna do is try to nail at least 3. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like, right? And you don't have to have something that's actually food for it to taste away, right? Math to me tastes like Brussels sprouts when they're boiled, right? It's terrible, right? You can be a synesthete when you are giving answers or describing something. Metaphors and analogies are also your friend, right? And if you have a particular way of doing metaphors and analogies, go for it. If you can speak off the cuff like, Annmarie, we bow down to you, then go for that. Any kind of like weird flip of an image is always good. This is why it's good to have the story in your back pocket. It shouldn't be necessarily like, well, Bob, when I was 6 years old, I was very young, right? Like that's not what you want. It doesn't have to be rehearsed. And if it feels, if you rehearsed it, they will know, right? And that's not care, that's preparation, right? There's a difference between care and preparation. And you want to demonstrate care, passion, right? Authenticity is the most attractive thing in a story, right? And so, like, you also have to give yourself permission to be authentic, right? I don't know about you, but when I'm out and about in the world, well, usually I just don't talk to anybody. But the thing that I'm always worried about is like looking idiotic, right? How many of you have tripped over one of those like things in the sidewalk, and you always look back to go j'accuse, right? Like, and you know, like you're looking to see if anybody's seen you, right? Like just fall over the crack in the sidewalk. Don't face plant, but like be okay with it, right? It didn't do it on purpose. But I think it's really important to just sort of be that person. One last thing, and then we'll move on to Jia. And also, I think, you know, your story about the first interview you did, or the interview that never, it's like the Atari game that got buried in the desert, right? Metaphor. That never made it out into the world, and you were really, but it was, so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Chris Rock, right? But Chris Rock talks about like craft, and one of the things that he says is, you have not made it as a comedian until you have bombed on stage. And it's the same, how many of you have ever made a roux? I'm also, like, I used to be a professional chef. Make a roux. You ever made a roux until it burned to see exactly what nut brown looks like? That's how you do that shit. You burn a roux. Don't be afraid to bring your real. Don't be afraid to be passionate. Talk about the thing that you geek out about and love, and show how much you care. Okay. Oh yes.
Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. I write films and I write these scripted podcasts called Speaking of Crime. I write documentary films to be specific. And I'm going to continue talking about what Harriett was saying as far as failure when you're being interviewed. And this started for me, I was always the interviewer. I was interviewing the subjects of my film. I was interviewing people for my podcast. And it was a really interesting place to be because I was always interviewing people about the worst times of their life. I do true crime, and so it was something real serious that had happened in their lifetime. And I'm essentially a stranger, and I come in there and I poke and prod about everything and anything that is probably terrifying for them to speak about, and then I expect them to be very candid and open and honest and just an open book, which is a really tough thing for somebody to do as an interviewee. And so I had a knack for this. So I was very excited when I got into this world because people opened up to me really easily. And I thought, well, I have this little gift here and it's really working. And then, thank goodness, and so exciting, my first film came out, my podcast came out, and then everything switched. And then I was being called for interviews about my movie. And then I would have to go to these interviews and I was mortified. I was like, I'm gonna say the wrong thing. I don't want to be on camera at all. I want to be behind the camera, and I'll preface this with, these ladies are so wonderful. I don't have what they have, this just go up there and be funny and be wonderful. It's just not my forte. So I was mortified, truly. And I learned a lot of great tips along the way that have made it a lot easier. I still hate it, to be honest. I like being behind the camera and never in front of a mic or a camera. But I'll share with you the things that really made it easier for me to deal with failure. And if you have a mindset like me, and I hope most of you don't, I always kind of feel like I'm failing all the time. I'll go to an interview and afterwards I'll analyze the shit out of it and I'll be like, I should have said this, I should have said that, I said that wrong, I could have said this clearer, and I do that to myself. And so it always feels like it wasn't a great job. And these are kind of the tips that really carry me through and force me to do the interviews and then to actually be a good interviewee in the end. The best tip I ever learned was you can take control of any interview at any time. Everybody goes in thinking that the interviewer is in charge and the interviewer is the one who's leading everything. But it's not really the case at all, because as the person being interviewed, you have the final say. You're answering the questions. So if somebody asks you a question you don't want to answer, or they ask you something controversial or something that you maybe just don't want to talk about, you can rephrase it and you can answer the question that you wished they asked. Always. You can always do that. And there's an art to that. One, people tend to match other people's energies. So the interviewer's negative, you can pump up your energy and answer in a more positive way, and that'll influence the way that that person is responding to you, first and foremost. Secondly, when they ask you something, and let's say you don't want to answer it or it's just negative or whatever, you can say, there's lots of segue things you can say, such as, that's a really interesting question. The way I look at it is, or, what I took away from that was, and then speak about the other thing. Whatever it is that you would like to shed light on. And when I learned this trick, it changed the way that I did interviews. Because then I wasn't scared anymore going into them, and I wasn't like, oh my God, they're gonna ask me something. Maybe don't want to answer it, I just don't know the answer, or I'm too nervous. You can really flip the script when you're doing interviews. And that's really important to keep in mind when you go on podcasts and somebody asks you questions. You have to remember, and preparation is key, because if you prep the things the points you really want to get across, when they ask you things that aren't exactly what you want, you can go back in your mind to the 3 or 4 points that you really wanted to hit, and you can rephrase their question and kind of re-guide it to be what you wanted it to be. I hope that's making sense. It is, yes. Give an example.
Give an example? Oh, goodness, let me think here.
You guys have one?
Or like ruminate on it till Q&A, and then maybe if one comes, you can give us that time?
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
A specific example of like a time that you're asked a question that you don't want to answer or don't know how to, is that
Yeah.
the
You
example you're
already
asking
gave an
for?
example. You just gave an example.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like, for example, my film is about a 16-year-old boy who was wrongfully convicted of a rape and murder that he didn't commit in New York. And people will ask me things like, was he abused in prison? That's not a question that I think is for me to answer, because that's a really personal thing, and it's his to answer. So I will rephrase their question and say, Jeff was treated horrifically in prison in ways that nobody should be treated, and sexual abuse and such is a real big problem in our prison systems, and it happens every day. And there's a statement that I want to share, but I'm also not oversharing Jeff's story or something that I morally don't think I should be speaking to, he should be speaking to, as an example. Yeah? The other thing is you can always bridge to a personal story. So if you have these anecdotes, and as we talked about before, stories resonate with people much more than facts. So if you have stories in the back of your mind that relate to whatever you're doing the interview about, that really helps. That's a really easy way to pivot, to talk about whatever it is that you kind of want to share and that you've prepped in advance. Acknowledging and redirecting, and I kind of touched on this, but you can say, that's an interesting question, but you know what that reminds me of? Or you know what that really connects for me? And then you talk about what it is that you want to talk about. So those are some tactics that help, and for me, keeping those in my back pocket really helped me over the hump of just not doing the interviews, because actually, I used to do that in the beginning. I got asked to do some interviews, one on TV, and I said I was sick and I just didn't go because I was like, I'm just going to bomb, like I can't do it. So I just didn't do it. And it was really detrimental to my own success because then I wasn't getting the message out there for the product that I have, which is a film or a podcast. And so those things really, really helped me. What else? Turning it around when it's not going well. This is a fun one. And most people think silence is a bad thing. They think you have to fill silence. And actually silence can be a great thing. You can always use it in two ways. You can pause and take it all in and think about your answer and don't worry about the silence for a few seconds. Or you can use silence to emphasize things. You can say what you want and just leave it at that. You can make short statements. You don't have to elaborate, and let the silence fill the space for a few seconds and let people just take in what you said. And those are little tactics that have really helped me. Anything else you guys want to add on that? No? Good? Else. If you truly can't answer a question, deflect with grace. I would say something like, I wish I had a clearer answer on that. But what I can say, and then pivot to something constructive, or again, something you want to share. So just all little ways for you to always remember in the back of your mind that as the interviewee, you can take complete control of that interview, and you don't have to go in nervous that you won't know what you're doing or that you won't be a good interviewee. If you just prep a little bit and get comfortable with a little bit of silences and awkward questions that you can redirect, you can really just control the whole thing and really ace it, I think. Yeah. I'll pass it back to Laura.
Thank you, Jia. And I love giving podcast recommendations. If y'all don't know the podcast Dolly Parton's America, it is a great example of somebody who's a master at deflecting questions, Dolly Parton that is, and they talk about this in the podcast. It's just an 8-episode podcast, beautiful little podcast that Jad Abumrad and Shima Aaliyah, I think, is the other co-host, do together, so check that one out. But yeah, Dolly Parton was the master of that. So one thing that I want us to just maybe go down as a panel and answer is, what do you think the secret is to a successful interview? Like if you had to pick one thing, each of you, and you can jump in whatever order here, what do you feel like the secret is to a successful podcast interview?
On the talking side, like on the receiving?
On the receiving side, yeah, like as somebody who's interviewing other people.
Oh, it's interviewer.
Yes. And I can start us off. So one thing that I really love is when somebody has thought about what drives their creative work and why they create the things that they create. I think a lot of us know that we love to create and we know why we write specific stories, but if you start to understand the through line of everything that you've ever created and really, I mentioned obsessions earlier, like I think we all have these central obsessions that we keep writing into again and again. And if you can have some awareness of what your own obsessions are as a writer and the things that just get you excited to write about and talk about, that can be like talking to somebody and interviewing somebody who understands that about themselves can be so fascinating and enlightening and exciting.
So you're asking, isn't that fun? Go ahead. I mean, so
Yeah, come up here.
So, clarify the question again?
So,
This is also something you can do in an interview.
yes, exactly. No, this is true. So I want to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, Harriet says.
Yeah. So, so when we have a piece of advice about all of this, are you talking about the advice that we have as somebody who's going to conduct an interview?
I'm saying when you're interviewing somebody and you're sitting down with somebody and it's just sparks are flying, like what is one thing that makes that happen, that makes a successful interview? Because we know there are many answers to this question, right? It's not just one thing. We've talked about a lot of these things, but your one thing that you love when this happens in an interview.
Kindness.
Say yes.
This is a trick that I learned from professors in film school, and they said that if you can get the person who you're interviewing, and so I guess this advice would be for both sides, to really put themselves in the moment of the story that they're telling. So put yourself, your mindset back into that moment and think about what were you feeling in that time and what was the environment like and what, your five senses in that moment. Then when you share that story, it really comes across and people resonate and it feels really authentic, and that's great for anyone listening. It's great for the person interviewing you, and obviously it's great for the person telling the story because it really puts you back in that time.
I did not go to interviewing school, so that's a good tip, and you should definitely do that. I don't do that. I listen to interviews. So if you're going to come on my show, the first thing I'm going to do is see who else has interviewed you, and I'm going to listen to it. And then I'm not going to ask you any of those questions. So you should definitely pivot and try to get those answers in. But I'm also going to ask you, because you're going to get really rote. When you're out there talking about your work, you're going to get so tired of talking about your work, and you're just going to go into automatic pilot. I'm always looking for ways to interrupt that, and for you to give me an answer to a question nobody else has asked you. So I don't know. I was talking with a poet recently, and we got into a really long conversation about Nicolas Cage's performance in Moonstruck, and there's two kinds of people in this world. Those who understand the magnificence of Nicolas Cage. I lost my hand. I lost my bride. Johnny has his hand. There's two kinds of people in the world, right? Those who get that movie and those who are also just haven't gotten it yet. But I am really, really interested in those authentic, awkward moments when people are like, what? And they'll just give me an answer that no one has ever asked them before. And I think that getting back to what Harriet said and what Jia talked about, yes, you're gonna bomb. I have bombed so badly in every job interview I've ever. People ask me things like, why do you want this job?
And I'm like, why would I want this job?
It's like I've never thought of that question, but that's a real crackerjack question. I don't know. Maybe I don't want this job. And so I need to sell luggage, I think is what I've learned here. Just learn how to sell a suitcase or something. But I am really interested when people drop the script, as I'm clearly doing now, and just go for it. Like, what are you about? Like, I'm gonna drop the script again and say we should do one more audience participation. I love this idea, like, what could you geek out about?
Yes.
Like, just talk to the person next to you. Like, what do you know a lot? Like, I know a lot about the movie Moonstruck. Like, I could do a whole bit. Old man, you give those dogs one more piece of my food, I'm gonna kick you till you're dead. Like, I could, but that's neither here nor there. What can you geek out about? Like, what are you an expert at? So one more audience participation. Please talk to the person next to you. What do you know? Like, what are you an expert at? What can you geek out about?
And just in case you're stumped by that, I'm going to give you a slightly different way to think about the same question, because this is another interviewer skill that, if you're on the interviewer side, or interviewee side, is good to know about. Good interviewers will ask the same question in multiple different ways, and if they're really skillful, you won't even realize they're asking the same question like 6 different times. So this is option number 2, basically the same question, is what's a question that you would like to be asked about on a future podcast? Okay, so we'll give you about, 60 seconds here?
Not long enough.
2 minutes? 2 minutes. All right, Annmarie says 2 minutes, and Harriet, one more time, what's the sound we're listening for? Okay, so when you hear that, you're done. Go ahead, find somebody and share the thing that you are passionate, excited, sizzling about. Okay, we're going to move to Q&A, but before we do, I'm wondering if we have a few of you who will be willing to share your 6-word origin stories. Okay, is it possible for us to bring that mic around?
Is this working?
Yeah, I think that one's working. Can you do that, Jia? Hold on.
Can you shout it out?
Can you shout it out?
Yeah, we can also.
Like, shout it out and then you repeat it on the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so your 6-word story, and tell us your name. Yeah, right up here in front.
I don't know if it will. Yes.
Are you okay?
So my name is Patricia Wenzel. My 6-word story is, I was evil, now I'm not.
Okay, and I'm going to follow Patricia's lead here and just say, if anybody can come to the front here so we can get this so everyone can hear it. Amazing, beautiful. All right, tell us your name and your 6-word story.
My name is Vida, V-E-D-A. Born quiet, kept silent, now free.
Okay, come on up.
Hi, I'm Brenda Cedar Fuller. My 6-word story is...
Get a little closer.
Closer? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. Transgender child, decorate for pride, competitively.
All right, we got somebody else coming up here. Yeah, just come on down. You got one. Yeah, just stand up.
Obsessed over my father's classified death.
Wonderful. Can you tell us who you are?
James Wells. It's actually classified by the CIA 60 years later.
Okay, who else? Come on up.
I'm Karen Grossman. Grief-looted, breath-deepened, wings spread.
Okay, let's maybe 2 more. Or yeah, we could do a few more. Come on, come on. You're right. Oh no, I see you. Come on, let's come here. We could do 4 more.
Both of you, come on.
Yeah, come on.
We're getting this second one. It's just 6 words.
Yeah, just 6. Oh my God.
This is like
Black.
Yeah, it is.
Bladder Pepper, opposite of what immigrant parents want. Sorry, just for 2 more seconds. I love the last exercise that we did. That was really cool. And I see how, I felt like we both came to life when we were sharing. Like, I could see the magic that happens in that moment. It was really cool.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay.
Okay, I'm Bella Mahaya Carter, and my story is Kid Who Thought She Could Fly.
I'm Brian Foyce. Logical technologist transformed into right-brained artist.
Very nice.
My name is Blair Glazer, and I'm nodding to Hemingway. Baby shoes worn, outgrown too fast.
My name's Ariana Rebellini, and my book about this is coming out, so it's important for me. It's heavy. Wanted a kid, but was suicidal.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, my name is Taylor, and 6-word story, riches to rags, fighting off felonies.
All right.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I know the guac cost extra.
One more. Okay, last one here, and we'll be Q&A.
Latina Texas escapee, poverty, trauma, PhD.
Okay, so maybe just the same way we did the 6-word stories, so that everybody can hear. If you can, since we don't have a mic, we can walk around. I wish we did, but that one's not working, is it? No, okay, well, we'll make do. Do you have a question? Yeah, please, come on up. I'm gonna. Here, we'll try to pull this up a little bit. There you go.
So, we're writers with books. What part in the book publishing, what time in the book publishing process is the best time to pitch to be on a podcast? Like before it's published, when you have a date, when it's still speculative?
Great question, and I think we probably have at least a couple answers here. Excellent job. See, this is why we're audio people.
Yeah.
It only took an hour.
I didn't listen to the question, only because I was fixing the mic. I don't want to answer it, it's someone else.
Okay, but I know you're going to have an answer for this one, Annmarie, so I'm going to repeat the question. What time in the book timeline of pitching the book, having the book accepted, having the book published, when is the best time?
Everyone messes this up. What they do is the book's coming out on Tuesday, and so you pitch me like Monday afternoon at 4:30, and hey, I've got a book coming out tomorrow. I can't fit you in, that's not going to happen. Thridi Umrigar was the best person I talked to about this. She said, once you turn in your manuscript, celebrate, drink Prosecco, go to Rome, take a week, and then you need to start pitching. When Melissa Febos came on my show, she and I talked in November. Her book is not out until June. Jean Kwok came, she talked in October, her book was coming out in the spring. You should be thinking 2 seasons ahead on your publicity. It's so much earlier than you think. You're not even ready to talk about it yet, but that gets back to failure. You're gonna be terrible sometimes. The interviews are how you're gonna learn how to talk about the book, and that's fine. There's a new rule. We don't have to be perfect. In fact, we can't be perfect, so just let that go. But yeah, you need to start publicity 3 months, 6 months, 9 months ahead, and make me tell you no. So if you know how you write the letter and you never hear back, and you know it's because they hate you? It turns out they were just busy that day. Circle back. Hey, remember I sent you this pitch? It's still about this. Could we connect? Make me tell you no. I just chatted with a woman who pitched me 3 times. I think I said yes because I was embarrassed that I had to take it. That's fine. Guilt me into having you on the show. It doesn't matter. But be a good advocate and champion of your work. Don't worry if they don't get back to you right away. It's fine. I fix this so we can go around.
Yeah, and if people have questions, just raise your hand and Annmarie will find you. While she's finding you, I just want to add something that we didn't talk about yet, which is that if you are like, okay, I pitched myself to Fresh Air and Terry Gross didn't want to interview me, please remember that one of the beautiful things about the moment that we're living in is that there are literally millions of podcasts out there, and there are probably at least hundreds of podcasts that would be interested in your book. And you don't have to go to the big show that has millions of listeners for you to get the kind of experience that Annmarie is talking about. And in fact, when you do finally get that call from Terry Gross, it's really good if you've already been on a bunch of shows already, talking about your craft, talking about that thing that gets you excited that led to you writing this book that is not yet published but is coming out next June, or whatever it is. So please remember, there are many, many places that don't have a huge reach, don't have huge downloads, but they are making stuff. And so that will be good practice for you. And you also never know. You know, shows blow up all the time. And one show can lead to the next, and they like you and they recommend you to somebody else who's got a little bigger of an audience. You know, really think about, in the same way that you would submit to small literary journals when you're starting out and not just go straight to the New Yorker, you know, this is have the long game in mind.
I have a quick thing to add to that question. All times are good times. All of them. I don't know if this mic is on.
You gotta get really close to that one.
Okay, yeah. All times are a good time in the whole book publishing process, but it's key when there's a call to action. If you have book pre-sales or something that you can utilize that interview for.
Yeah. Okay, Annmarie, where are we?
Yeah, this is a little bit for myself and also for a friend, but it kind of goes off of this too. If your book is like nonfiction and really topical, especially for maybe like political or like health related topics, is it okay if it's published but still pretty new? Would podcasters be interested in still having you on to talk about it if you can kind of use some like, you know, press or noise that's been going out there to use your book to talk about that as well?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we often think about, oh, the book got published and I sort of like missed, you know, maybe you were like what Annmarie was saying, you waited till Monday afternoon, your book's coming out on Tuesday. It is still a good idea to get your stuff out there, because the great thing about podcast episodes is they have a long life. You know, they're on the internet basically forever. And so I've had authors be on my show where, like, you know, it's been 3 years since I made an episode of Shelter in Place, and a lot of those episodes still get downloads, like a lot of downloads, and people find them through some weird other channel. And that author is still getting publicity and good press for their book. So absolutely. Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah,
go
I'll
ahead,
add
Jia.
to that. I wrote for Forbes for 10 years, and in all the pitches we got, the one thing that happened all the time is people would say, oh, I have this book, or I have this thing that I did. Look at me, write about me. And those never worked. But what worked is if you could see what's going on in the current landscape, in any which way, what's in the news, what's hot, what's been political, what have you, and somehow if you can tie that to your book or tie that to your product and then pitch it and say this is relevant right now because, and then you're much more likely to get coverage.
For those of us we're a little bit unclear on the concept when we publish the book. Is it worth to have to pitch when the book has been out for a year? Although the book is an interesting book, but you know, is it worth?
Sure, you gotta be your advocate. I don't care if your book's been out for 5 years. If you can come up with the fact that it is National Flip Flop Awareness Tuesday, I didn't know about that, and your book is about flip flops. Just be a champion of your work. There's no statute of limitations on getting out there. I know folks who tour with their book for 10 years. I would love to do that. You know, do. I'm coming over there.
Is there a resource or a list of all podcasts in the United States and perhaps their area of focus or interest?
Yeah, podcast searchability, it's such a big question. There's lots of lists out there, and you know, Google is not a terrible place to start with that. There's a couple of different podcast websites, and we probably all have our different resources. I really like Podchaser. They have a lot of curated lists on there. People make Spotify playlists. You know, that's sort of up to the users to come up with that. But you can also look at if there's a show that you like. Sometimes on their website, they will also have a section where like other shows that are like theirs or that they like, you know, some podcasts will do that. But Podchaser is probably the best one that I know of in terms of just like it's grouped by different themes, and they make it's not a huge organization, and I think that's to their benefit that they've really tried to kind of curate some different lists. There's also podcast newsletters out there that focus specifically on storytelling and things that are going to be more in probably most of our wheelhouse. One of the ones I really love is called The Audio Storyteller. Claire Wiley, who's here in LA, writes that one. And I had the gift of being interviewed just a couple weeks ago in that newsletter. But she does a great job, I think, of featuring, you know, just interesting storytelling podcasts that are out in the world and people that are doing that work. Any other recommendations on that? There's so many things. Yeah, yep. Okay, 5-minute warning.
Building on that question, is there any data on how many listeners or downloads a particular podcast has? And then another question, I was on a podcast that seemed very much in line with my topic, but it turned out the interviewer basically just used this as a vehicle for him entertaining. So I came away feeling like I was just, you know, a volleyball being punted around, and he would just sort of go off on these tangents that he wanted to talk about and make jokes and stuff. And, you know, I know you can try and deflect, but this was who he was, clearly. It wasn't just a bad question. It was like, this was the him show, and I was the, you know, the foil.
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry, because that is a lousy experience. I think many of us have been on the receiving end of that, and it's not fun. I would say one thing would be to just listen to the shows ahead of time as much as you can to try to get a sense of like, hey, is this somebody who seems thoughtful and is like really going to be engaged with my work, or are they just, you know, trying to make fun of their guests? But you mentioned, you know, download numbers, things like that. There's a number of different things out there now that you can do. One that I really love that is not quite as well known is Listen Notes. And Listen Notes will tell you information about the podcasts that will be like, what global percentage is it? You know, is it in the top 5%, in the top 1%, the top 10%? And so you can, and then other things about the podcast as well. And most podcasts are out there. Every now and then you find a really small one that isn't there, but they have a pretty robust database. So that's probably the place that I would say is going to give you the most objective information about that.
But also know that your network, like, even if, I mean, when I first started the show, the listeners were my mom, but not really, because she wasn't listening, and my auntie, who didn't understand what a podcast was, but she would press play. Like, there was no one listening when I first started the show, but that doesn't mean that those interviewers didn't have that show. Like, it didn't matter to them. They could circulate it to everyone for forever. So just because a show doesn't have a lot of reach, you're still okay. You have that interview. You can use that interview to leverage other interviews. Don't be afraid if you're invited on a show with 200 subscribers, you have your own network and you get to have that. I'm sorry that douchebag did that to you. Some people are just dicks, so sorry about that.
Okay, we have maybe time for one more question.
Okay, this is a timeline question. I have a new book out. Downstairs there are 50 copies. These are the only copies in existence. A month from now, print on demand. But so I have been hesitant to try to get podcast gigs because you can't buy the book. So that's my dilemma. And any advice on what to do would be very gratefully taken.
Do you want to take this one?
Well, I mean, you're also, you know, there's the book that you're trying to sell, but there's also just the existence of you in the world. I did write a book, but I've also written lots of other things. Presumably, that's not the only thing you're ever going to create. And so people are going to be interested in your story. I'm sure all of us have listened to podcasts, and we have not bought that book, but we love knowing about the existence of that storyteller. So it's not just about selling that one thing that one time. It's about letting people know about the existence of your story and your work in the world, and also just like the gorgeousness of connection. I don't know about you, but humaning is really lonely. I don't love it all the time. How great is it to just talk to someone and like tell them your truth and like tell them you're weird, and like there's something gorgeous about that experience, whether you sell a book or not.
I guess I would also say, just from a practical standpoint, if you know, my website, we use Squarespace and we have a store on there. One of the things that I do, my husband and I have a business called Narrative Podcasts, which I would be remiss if I didn't mention. If you scan that QR code, you'll see all of our information. Well, not all of our information, just the stuff we want to share with you. Where to follow us. And one of the things that's on there is We are at Narrative Podcast, we are doing the biggest promotion we have ever done in the history of being a company, and that is 50% off our online course, our upcoming workshops. We do a lot of live and asynchronous things, and you can do it from anywhere in the world. And you will learn every step of podcast production if you do that, and also get private coaching, and live workshops is built into part of that, and even audio editing software. And all of the places you can follow us on the socials are there. And what I was going to say in answer to your question, to bring it back around, is we have a store on Squarespace where if I were in your shoes, I'm just imagining, okay, have something set up on your website where people can buy your book through Squarespace, and then as soon as those orders come in, you can send it to the print on. I mean, I don't know enough about print on demand to know if that would work for you, but I'm guessing maybe that might be a way for you to meet that demand, when you start getting orders coming in.
As my therapist says, our time is up.